This map shows the 13 American colonies, labeled here as they were named at the time. They were not all the same. We talked about them as all the colonies, but they really weren't the same, and they're still not all the same. Massachusetts, Virginia, New Jersey, Georgia, there are different kinds of accents that you can expect to hear in each of those places, right? You can sometimes tell when from the way someone's speaking, whether they're from like Carolinas or more likely from like New Hampshire or from New York. There are certain political attitudes that we expect in different places, different ways that people vote, different kinds of laws like gun laws that you find in some places and not in others. There are different levels of racial tolerance that we expect in certain places. And in a lot of ways, some of these places seem to be like a separate culture. They're all American, but don't all quite seem to be the same. What you're going to see here is how, again, these colonies weren't all the same, and some of those differences that we have today, you're going to see how they really got started way back in the time before they were even states, when they were still all colonies. So it may be more useful to look at these as regions, and that's what this map shows here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different regions of settlement. You can see the colony borders here as well, so you can see where some of these regions sort of overlap, or they all overlap, multiple colonies. So instead of looking at separate colonies right now, we're going to look at these different regions, because there were really 7 different groups of people that came across to settle these areas. And you're going to see some of those differences about accents and so on as we go through here. So the first area that we'll look at is called New France, and this area was mostly settled by people from France, of course, Catholic kind of Christians. Some families, but mostly single guys coming over to do trade. Not really so much to settle, but they were coming over here to trade, make a living that way. And the kind of trade they're doing is fish. They're fishing in the ocean in that area, and also fur from animals. The climate up here is not really great for farming, so there'd be some of that, but that's not what people really came here to do. And because of the way they're kind of trading, they're here to trade, and they have to work a lot with Native American tribes, so the white folks in this area are much more friendly with the Native Americans, and they're doing a lot more traveling sort of north and west, staying away from a lot of the other regions we'll be looking at. This area that we're going to color blue and call Yankeedom, which includes but goes beyond Massachusetts, this is the area where a lot of English Protestant families come. Middle class, not really rich, not really poor, come along to the coast, settle further inland, and spread out into that blue area that you see here. And these people came with a very specific idea of making a perfect world for God. So they're coming across with a very religious-based idea in mind, which is really different from what the English king was thinking of. So you get a culture here of self-government. These are people who decide in our town, in our area, we're going to govern ourselves. They respected the royal family, but from the very beginning there was some distrust of the English royal family, which is why they came over here instead of staying in England. And there's also a culture of intolerance here. They don't like the English lords. They really dislike Catholics and the Indian tribes too. It's a real culture of distrust of these groups because they don't want the same kind of perfect world for God. A little farther south, we have the region we're going to call Tidewater. And these are, again, English people coming over. 2 kind of groups, though. You have rich lords, some of the ones that Yankeedom hated, and they're bringing over a lot of poor single whites. So these are all English folks coming across. And the rich, the poor, they're all trying to get, well, even more money and even more resources in this new world. The rich are trying to get richer, and the poor are just trying to make a living and get by. The way they're doing this is with cash crops, especially tobacco grows really well in that soil. So that's what folks are coming across to do. The poor single whites are doing a lot of the work. Later on, it will be African slaves coming across, but early on, that's how the poor English whites come across. And their attitude to England is quite strong. These are folks who are coming over, not even thinking it will be permanent at first. Some of them think they'll get rich and then be able to go back home. Some do, but most don't, actually. Um, and this whole thing of having very rich and very poor leads to a culture of honor and respect. Um, Lords with each other and what they expect from these poor whites as well. So you get a very specific idea of how people are supposed to act. All right, this little area here we'll call New Netherland, centered by New York City, originally called New Amsterdam when it was controlled by the Dutch. And this is still a notable region today, the New York City area. The people who settled here were from all over Europe. There were families, single people coming from all over Europe. Lots of people from different places. The location with all the rivers and the ocean and the harbor is a great place for trade. So you get a lot of rich, middle class kind of people coming. And again, they're from all over. They're originally people from Netherland speaking Dutch. But you get people speaking English, speaking French, speaking Spanish, all kinds. And it's a much more tolerant region, a very diverse kind of place. So the attitude is more tolerant. And this gets a society based on status, sort of how much money you have, how much trade do you do, is what really determines how sort of valuable you are in society here. All right, we're going to look at the Deep South region now, that yellow area. This area is originally set up by rich lords, English-speaking lords, English lords, who had already set up things in the Caribbean, but they've run out of space on the island. And so they're spreading their system, expanding from their plantations of kind of tropical sort of crops that they can grow. A little later on, you get some poor whites who've also run out of space in Tidewater. So the Deep South is an area where folks are kind of moving into because they ran out of space where they were before. The slave system demands a very strictly leveled society from the very beginning, based on race, the color of your skin, and based on money and status as well. So within whites, whether you're rich or poor, and not much in the middle, frankly. And they have a close connection with England, just like we saw with Tidewater. They're trading some of those cash crops across the ocean. All right, in this area here, the Midlands, you get people from all over Europe. Most of them are middle class, so they're not real rich, not real poor. You get a lot of families mostly coming here. So they're looking to settle down, and they're all escaping some kind of trouble. There were some wars, there were some religious things going on in Europe, a lot of religious kind of battles and insecurity. So this is the kind of place where people come to. So you get a real variety, a lot of different kinds of languages, religions. But the people coming here, they're looking to kind of get away from other folks. So they really sort of avoid contact outside their village. They sort of set up their own place, and they all speak Swedish, or they're all pretty much all Jewish, or they're all Quakers, for example. And they all really keep to themselves. So it's a certain kind of, it's not quite the tolerance we see other places. Sort of a you keep your distance, I'll keep my distance. And we don't really blend together much. We don't really trade outside of our own villages. And some of us have trouble even talking to each other because of the different kind of languages. So that's what you get really going on in the Midlands, sort of keep your distance and I'll keep mine. And we're going to wrap up. We wrap up in this area in the Appalachian hills and mountains. The group of people that come here are kind of different from the groups we've seen elsewhere. They mostly speak English, but they hate the English. They're Scottish, they're Irish, they're from other areas of the British Islands, and they're mostly poor because the English and the Scottish Irish have been fighting each other in England and Britain for a long, long time. So they've come here to escape England's control, escape sort of the tyranny of England, and you see they get as far away from England really as they can. They're out of the Isles, they've crossed the ocean, and they're not even really in the proper colonies, is where they've come over to. They're not loyal to the empire, to the English empire at all. They come over usually in large families called clans, and that's really where they kind of stick to, is those sorts of communities. So these are farmers. They're not looking to trade outside their community or their clan. They really distrust anyone outside. Distrust the English, distrust Indian tribes, distrust even other Scottish or Irish people sometimes, if they're not from their own clan. So different kind of social relation going on here, and a very clear reason why they've come to this part of the of North America.